It's extraordinary what people say they saw at Ford's Theater that night. John Wilkes Booth was a megastar.
The American political climate has always been rife with division, but even juxtaposed against today's polarized environment, it has never been nearly as divided as it was during the Civil War. I'm Alec Baldwin. This is a story that shows how the lines are so often blurred between hero and villain, immortality and infamy, justice and vengeance, and how in that respect nothing has changed today. Listen to The Ides of April, starting July 23rd, wherever you get your podcasts.
This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Even the desert gets cold in January, especially at night. The kind of cold that settles deep into your bones. The kind of cold that makes everything feel quieter, darker, more still. But on this particular night, in an already quiet alley behind a grocery store, that stillness was broken by something strange, something not quite right. A woman, a luxury car, a heavy object, a dumpster. But that's actually the end of the story. To understand how we got here, how this glittery, glamorous life unraveled into scandal, blood, and betrayal, we have to rewind. Because this isn't a case of a missing person or a cheating spouse or even a murder. It's all of those things and then some. It starts with a wealthy bachelor, a mysterious French woman, and a high society love story that quickly turned dark. This is the story of Valerie Pape and the man who should have never married her. Hi, guys. Welcome to Death by Southwest. Still trying that cold open thing. It feels a little weird to me. I'm not going to lie. Like, it feels strange to just get on and start immediately talking about the story without saying hello. So I don't know if we'll keep it. And I also still don't know why I keep saying we, because it's just me. Anyways, hopefully this doesn't cut me off because it is raining like crazy. It's actually stopped for now, but has been raining like crazy. And the internet has been a little bit shaky, so we'll see. We are going to jump right into our story today. No small talk, no sense of place, because our story takes place in Phoenix, Arizona, and we have covered Phoenix, I feel like, extensively before. So just in case you're a new listener, usually I do a sense of place, just a few minutes telling you about the location where our story is in the Southwest. But at episode 111, I guess we're at, we've definitely had our fair share of stories in Phoenix and Scottsdale. So I guess I could, for anybody who's not familiar and hasn't listened to the show before, Phoenix is in pretty much smack dab in the middle of Arizona. It is like a parking lot in the middle of the desert. It's very hot, pretty much year round, although our story does mostly take place in January, so it's pleasant in January, I guess. At night, it does get very, very cold, though. And what else? It's a very big city. Scottsdale is the kind of bougie part of Phoenix, and so our story takes place mostly there in Old Town Scottsdale. And that's it. That's going to be our sense of place for Phoenix. And this story is a little bit long, but it's a good one, so we're going to jump in. So let's first talk about the victim of our story. Before he was headline news and court case material, Ira Pomerantz was living a life that most people only dream about, if their dreams include silk shirts, sports cars, and imported fabrics. He was born in Monticello, New York, raised in Brooklyn, and he was the kind of guy who always knew how to make a buck. He carved out his fortune in the garment import business, buying and selling fabric to manufacturers in the New York fashion scene. And he built a pretty impressive empire doing that. And he had a real talent for business. But not so much domestic life. It wasn't exactly his strong suit, you could say. He was married twice, divorced also twice, And it wasn't that he was abusive or necessarily a cheater. He was a really independent guy. And I mean, probably shouldn't have been married in the first place. He liked to say he was allergic to being told what to do. And he was really far more interested in his bank account balance than date nights or deep conversations with his partner. So both of those marriages ended. He did have kids from those marriages. But by the early 90s, he was single, very wealthy, and looking for a fresh start. And that's when his good friend Luis Malazza told Ira, I'm heading to Phoenix. And Ira thought, okay, well, I'll come with you. Sunshine, real estate, golf, and plenty of younger women who'd never heard of his divorce settlements. Perfect. So he sold off what he needed to, packed up his life, and traded the hustle and bustle of New York for the desert charm of Old Town Scottsdale. Like I said, the swankiest part of Phoenix. But he wasn't just lounging poolside sipping martinis. I mean, he was doing that, but that isn't all he was doing. He also went pretty hardcore into the restaurant and nightlife scene. Always a businessman, he invested in bars, clubs, and hotspots around the city. If there was a velvet rope or bottle service, Ira was either owning the place or owning the room that he was partying in. He drove a Jaguar and then a Ferrari. He bought a 4,000 square foot mansion with a pool. He got his private pilot's license because why not? When you're rich, you can just do stuff like that. I mean, I guess you could get your pilot's license even if you're not rich, but it feels like a rich person thing to do. Although I do think we have a couple listeners who have their pilot's license, I want to say. Anyways, he also sometimes would, with this pilot's license, he would just fly to Vegas just for dinner, like just for the night, because he can do that. And yes, he was still playing the field romantically. He had money, he had charm, and he had that like classic older man who might buy you a Cartier bracelet if you smile at him just right. You know, that was his like energy. He was kind of flashy, kind of loud, and really living a bachelor dream. But one day in 1994, someone else entered the picture. Someone blonde, someone French, and someone who would change the trajectory of Ira's life forever. Long before she was making headlines in Phoenix, Valerie Pape was living the kind of life most Americans would slap on a vision board. Think European luxury, private chalets in Italy, designer everything, and enough Botox and baguettes to satisfy anyone. Valerie was born in 1952, somewhere in the idyllic French countryside. She was the daughter of a prominent doctor. And if you're picturing her childhood on the French countryside as like quaint and simple, no. She was spoiled rotten. She went to a fancy boarding school. She went to Paris on shopping sprees. She eventually had a carefully arranged marriage to a very wealthy CPA. She was living a luxurious life, to say the least. She and her first husband lived in Paris, but they also had homes in the suburbs surrounding Paris. They had vacation houses in the Alps, and they had vacation houses in Italy where they would spend their winters skiing. It wasn't like just expensive taste. She had an entire palette based on luxury. Chanel, Hermes, Cartier, all of it. All designer everything. But all the money and all the designer stuff couldn't buy her the one thing that she really wanted: a child. She was told that she couldn't conceive, so her and her husband adopted a baby girl. But don't cue the heartfelt music just yet, because things fell apart pretty quickly. The marriage ended badly. And here's what's really weird about it. Valerie lost custody, like completely. She lost all custody, didn't even get visitation, nothing. And again, this happened in France. I don't know exactly. I did not look into like kind of the rules with custody and divorce in France. So maybe that has something to do with it. But pretty much, at least here in the United States, when a mother isn't even granted visitation rights, something's up. Something bad. And whatever that something was, it left Valerie pretty untethered, devastated. So she did what a lot of beautiful, rich, emotionally wrecked people do when they want a fresh start. She moved to America, specifically Phoenix. And we all know how I feel about Phoenix. So this isn't totally out of the box for me to say, but it's not exactly the first place that I would expect like a designer draped, very bougie French woman to land when she comes to America. But she apparently had a few connections and friends in Phoenix and wanted to build a new life. And she did. Once she was in Phoenix, she signed up for cosmetology school. Yeah. From ski chalets to shampoo bowls. Yeah, she took cosmetology classes at the local community college, which was, I'm guessing, pretty humbling for her, and also pretty strategic because it was there in that school where fate kind of stepped in. One of her regulars at the school's salon was a sweet elderly man named Mr. Pomerantz. He lived in a nearby nursing facility and they enjoyed making small talk and chit chatting while she styled his hair. And eventually he asked her, "Are you single?" And when she said yes, he said, "Well, you really should meet my son." So in 1994, Valerie meets Ira. And this isn't one of those like awkward coffee shop first dates, Tinder first date at Chili's. No. Remember who we're talking about. We're talking about our very bougie Valerie from Paris and our very bougie Ira from New York. So naturally, their first date was a private jet flight to Las Vegas. Just the two of them, 30,000 feet in the air, champagne on ice, and a pretty exciting first date. For Ira, Valerie was exotic. She had a French accent, high-end fashion, and that kind of French aloofness that made her seem almost untouchable. For Valerie, Ira was her golden ticket. The guy with the big bank account and the nightlife connections, a man who could fund the next chapter of her luxurious life, or so she thought. For a little while, it worked. They dated, they dined, they dazzled. And then in 1995, they married. And like any newlywed fairy tale, the first order of business was open up a hair salon, obviously. Ira gave Valerie a significant chunk of cash to launch her own hair salon, and she called it Valerie Pape Salon. Super creative, huh? It was upscale, located in trendy Old Town Scottsdale, and meant to be, a sleek new start for her. She was supposed to open it with an investor friend, but that fell through before they got very far. So, what did Valerie do? She picked up the phone and called a man named Michel, an old friend from France, supposedly. Not a business associate, not a stylist, not someone who knows anything about salons, but a friend. And she begged him to come to Arizona. She begged him to invest in the salon. So a wealthy friend at that. And then she begged him to move in with her and Ira. Yeah, move in with them. Because apparently when a new business investor agrees to fund and co-own a business with you, the next logical step is to ask them to live in your marital home, in his own separate wing, of course. Seems a little bit like a red flag, but somehow Ira agreed to this. So now we've got Ira working late nights in his clubs, his much younger French wife running a fancy hair salon by day, and her very available, present, charming French business partner living under the same roof. So guess who started showing up as plus ones with Valerie to her social events that she would go to? Not Ira. Guess who people were whispering about around town about with Valerie. Again, not Ira. And guess who was allegedly sleeping with Valerie behind Ira's back while also sleeping in Ira's house and spending Ira's money? Yeah, not Ira. It was Michelle. So at some point, though no one knows exactly when this happened, Ira figured all this out. Maybe it was the sideways glances, maybe it was whispered phone calls, or maybe it was the fact that at a certain point, Ira had been fully banished to his own wing of the house, not a different room, an entirely different wing. Now remember, Michelle started in a different wing, but flash forward several months, and now Valerie and Michelle are basically living together on the other side of the house in a different wing of the house. They're like living it up. They're hosting guests, throwing parties, working in the salon together, while Ira is left in his own corner of the house like some rich, haunted roommate. Honestly, they barely crossed paths anymore. They didn't sleep in the same bed, and they hadn't shared anything resembling a real conversation in weeks, if not months. At this point, their marriage isn't just strained. It's dead. Whatever the final straw was, I'd imagine everything I just explained. But whatever it was, Ira was aware of the affair. He knew that Valerie and Michelle were sleeping together. And to his credit, he did not fly into a rage. He didn't grab a gun. He didn't burn down the hair salon. Instead, Ira went like full adult. In January of 2000, he just very calmly asked Valerie for a divorce. A clean break, he said. He wanted to keep it peaceful. But peaceful in this house where his wife is sleeping with her business partner under his roof, also while eating his imported cheese and sipping his hundreds of dollar wine. Seems like it would be difficult to keep it peaceful, but Ira tried. And it wasn't some big dramatic moment when he asked for the divorce. It was just kind of a quiet declaration of, I'm done, from a man who realized that the life he had built had turned into something completely different and pretty disrespectful at this point. Now, we don't know exactly how Valerie reacted, but we do know that the very next day, after Ira asked for a divorce, he vanished. About a week later, Ira's longtime friend, who he moved to Arizona with, remember, Luis Malatza, had a weird feeling. He felt like something was just kind of off. He and Ira talked all the time, like 4 or 5 times a week all the time. But in the past week or so, it had been radio silence. No calls, no messages, no sarcastic remarks about investors or Michelle's pants that were too tight that they always talked about. Just nothing. So Luis starts calling around trying to kind of figure out where Ira could be. When he finally gets in touch with Valerie, her answer is pretty casual. She says, "Oh, Ira? He probably just flew to Vegas for the week. You know how he is." And Luis was like, "Okay, yeah, sure. Ira did sometimes hop on the plane without any warning and fly out to Vegas. He did like his independence. He liked his freedom. And Vegas was like his second home. But even Ira didn't ghost anyone for this long. He would always let someone know where he was. He would never disappear for a full week without any word." Still, Valerie's playing it pretty cool. She doesn't seem alarmed at all. She doesn't ask Louise to keep her updated. And mind you, she doesn't seem to be looking for Ira at all. She's just assumed he's gone to Vegas and like, okay. She doesn't offer to call around. She just kind of shrugs it off like, Ira's having like a midweek vacation at the Bellagio. Luis isn't buying it though. So the next day, he's even more worried, and he calls Valerie and asks her to meet him at the Mesa Police Department. He wants to file a missing persons report. Again, feels weird that this is Ira's friend and not his wife. Even if they're estranged or going to be getting divorced, like, why isn't she concerned? Even though she doesn't seem concerned, she does agree to meet him at the police station, shockingly. And she shows up. She talks to the officer on duty. She gives a few vague answers, nods, signs some papers, and then she leaves. She was there for a total of maybe 10 minutes. No follow-up questions. She didn't stick around to see if they wanted to give her any phone numbers to call or so she could give her phone number so they could keep her updated. Nothing. She was just like, signed papers that they needed to file the actual report, and then boop, she left. It's not just a red flag. It's like 100 red flags. But unfortunately, there wasn't much anyone could do at this point. Her behavior seemed suspicious, but there was really nothing to do. Not yet, at least. Because while Valerie was out here trying to act unbothered, there was something else happening across town, something that no one, not even Luis, not the police, not even Valerie herself, could ignore. So it's Thursday evening, January 27th, 2000, or 28th. It's not totally clear. The sun has set, the air is cool, and a local delivery driver is running behind on his route. He pulls into the back lot of a supermarket in Phoenix, headlights flashing across a mostly empty alley, except for one thing that he sees. A Jaguar parked beside a dumpster with the trunk popped open and a petite blonde woman in a jumpsuit and high heels struggling to lift something out of the trunk and put it in the dumpster. Not something you see every day at night in the middle of an alley. So the driver slows down, watches, and realizes something about this just feels off. It's not like someone is tossing out like leftovers or they cleaned out their garage and they're throwing out some extra tools. This woman is moving in a way that feels serious and suspicious, like she's dumping some dead weight, literally. But he's late. He's got one more stop on his route and he can't be any later than he already is. So he doesn't really have time to deal with whatever this is right now. He jots down the license plate number on the Jaguar because he feels like, I better follow up on this. Something doesn't feel right, but I can't do it now. And good thing he did, because this delivery driver will become the single most important witness in this entire case. So later that night, after he finished his shift, his last delivery, he grabbed a coworker and they returned to the dumpster. And when they peered inside, they saw a large garbage bag, a large black garbage bag, and it was ripped just a little bit on the side. And they thought, all right, well, let's see what's in there. So they go to peek inside the bag slowly, cautiously, just pulling it open a little bit. And what they see is like a nightmare. They immediately call the police. And when officers arrive and fully remove the bag, cut it open, they're hit with a smell that no one forgets. Inside the bag is a human torso. No arms, no legs, no head, just a male torso dumped in a back alley trash. And when the police run the license plate number that the delivery driver gives them, it leads to exactly who you think it leads to. Valerie Pape. So it's now Friday, January 28th, and police aren't wasting any time. They show up to Valerie's sleek and trendy hair salon looking for answers. And to their surprise, they actually don't get met with much resistance. So they arrest her right then and there. And Valerie plays it very French-like, calm, composed, not frantic, not tearful, not even angry, just blank. Like she was being asked about like an overdue parking ticket, not, a human torso found in the dumpster that was traced back to her. In her initial police interview, she says something so wild, it almost feels believable. And so at first, police are thinking this could be true. She said, I came home and Ira was already dead. shot on the kitchen floor. I don't know who did it, and I didn't call the police because I panicked. Right. So you panicked. So instead of calling 911 or even like blaming Michelle, which wouldn't have been the dumbest thing to do, like that seems like a good person to blame. Instead, she decided to go full chainsaw massacre and dismember her husband and throw him out like yesterday's leftovers. Seems odd. And police start pressing her on how she disposed of the body and where the rest of it is. And she clammed up and asked for a lawyer. Can't imagine why. So they have a search warrant, which they got because her car was directly tied to the human torso of her husband that they found in a dumpster. So it was definitely easy for them to get a search warrant. And they went and combed through Valerie and Ira's mansion. And here's what they found related to this case. They did find a bullet lodged in the kitchen wall. They found several guns stashed in different places, one in the car, several in the home. And they found a receipt for a purchase of a reciprocating saw that was bought just several weeks ago. Like, who keeps the receipt to a saw that they're going to use to chop up their husband's body? Are you keeping it for your, like, what, taxes? It's ridiculous. It's just like such a stupid move. So the saw is, they believe, what was used to cut Ira's body into pieces. Now, the only thing that's troubling them at this point, well, there's a lot of things I'm sure troubling them, but one of the things that's troubling them is that Valerie is petite. She's about 5 feet tall, maybe about 100, 110 pounds. And Ira was about 5'10" and over 200 pounds. So it's a little bit hard for them to believe that this very petite French woman hacked apart a grown man over 200 pounds all by herself and then just like casually drove around dumping his body parts into dumpsters. Which brings us to Michelle. So here we are. We've got a torso, a suspicious wife, a receipt for a reciprocating saw, and a kitchen that still smells like bleach and bad decisions. But what we don't have is the rest of the body, or the answer to the glaring question of, did Valerie do this alone? So 200-pound man, 100-pound woman. Dismembering a body isn't only physically exhausting, it's a little bit like psychologically deranged. Like, you have to have not only strength physically, but mentally. You have to be precise. It's not something that just any old person can do, I don't believe. So unless Valerie had like some superhuman strength or like rage-fueled adrenaline, which why? Ira doesn't seem like the type to incite rage in anyone. So the theory that she pulled this off solo feels shaky. So we're back to Michelle, the so-called investor, the old friend, the man living rent-free in Ira's home while allegedly sleeping with Ira's wife. I mean, it really wasn't allegedly. The man who just so happened to be in the house, apparently, when Ira was killed and dismembered. And then the man who just seemed to vanish after all of this happened. Yeah. So police looked into Michelle a lot, but there was absolutely no physical evidence linking Michelle to the murder. No fingerprints, no receipts on his credit card for like a saw, no text messages, no witnesses placing him at a dumpster, nothing. And Michelle never confessed. He never slipped up, and he was never officially charged. But unofficially, I mean, come on. If he wasn't involved, then like there's somebody else in this story that everyone has overlooked and missed. You know, maybe Valerie pulled the trigger and killed her husband, Well, she claimed she didn't, but maybe she did that part, but someone had to have helped her. And I'm going to get to the pulled the trigger part because I know we haven't really discussed cause of death at all. Don't worry. So, even though it seems impossible that she did this alone, she never named an accomplice. She never mentioned Michelle's name, never came out of her mouth, not once. Even when the pressure mounted, even when her story seemed like it was kind of falling apart, she kept him out of it completely. Loyalty, perhaps, fear, no idea. I don't know. But we do know that Valerie was indicted. A grand jury handed down a charge of first-degree murder. And from here, things start spiraling into real soap opera territory. As soon as Valerie is indicted for first-degree murder, Phoenix turned into a full-blown media circus. Reporters were everywhere. Headlines were screaming, French femme fatale kills husband, torn apart in the desert. Everyone wants to know, did she do it? If she did, why? And where the hell is the rest of his body? Because obviously police checked all the dumpsters around the dumpster where they found the torso. They searched everywhere and couldn't find a thing. So this is where Valerie's legal team stepped in, and they decided it was time for a little rebranding. Gone was the image of this glamorous, high-maintenance salon owner with a live-in French lover. Now Valerie is cast as a victim. Yep. They are painting her suddenly as a battered wife, a woman living in fear, a woman who only lashed out in self-defense after enduring years of abuse from Ira. Cue the dramatic photos in the local paper of Valerie with two black eyes, looking oh so fragile and wounded. Their rebrand worked. The public sympathy shifted towards her for a minute until the paper had to print a retraction because guess what? Ira did not give those black eyes to Valerie. A recent facelift did. Valerie had a facelift the day before these photos were taken. I mean, if her image wasn't already bad enough, this is like, trying to plead innocence and gain sympathy by sending in post, cosmetic surgery bruises as evidence of abuse. I mean, you can't make this up. Well, she did. She did make this up, but Ira's family was having none of it. His daughters, Robin and Stacy, and both of his ex-wives publicly all said the same thing. Ira was never violent, ever. Not with them, not with anybody. He wasn't perfect, sure, but abusive? Absolutely, wholeheartedly, no. To them, this was not a story about a woman pushed too far. This was a story about a gold digger who got caught, didn't want to share any of the money that, she would get in if they divorced, and made sure that Ira would end up with nothing and she would end up with everything. While the lawyers argued and the public speculated, the most frustrating and chilling detail remained. Valerie never said where the rest of Ira's body was. Not once, not to the police, not to the judge, not even to his daughters who pleaded and begged with her in court. She just stared at them blankly, seemingly unbothered by it all, and never said a word. So, after all the chaos, the black eyes, the receipts of the saw, the I found him dead on the floor defense, Valerie Pape finally changes her story again. It's now 2002, and Valerie is looking at the reality of a first-degree murder trial with shaky evidence, no murder weapon match, no full body, and no smoking gun witness. Seems in her favor, kind of. However, she's also up against a DA who really knows how to work a jury, and a judge who's been watching her very closely and seems to really not like her. So Valerie takes a deal. She pleads guilty to second-degree murder. And her new version of events go something like Ira was yelling, I was scared, I grabbed a gun and fired in his general direction. I didn't mean to kill him. Oops. Fired in his general direction. Is that how he got a bullet like directly in the back of his neck? Now, my question as I'm researching and learning all about this story the whole time was like, how did he die? Was he actually shot? And how do we know? Were there bullets in his torso? Was he shot in his torso? No. So here's what I found out. While his head has not been recovered, forensic analysis of the severed neck at the top of the torso revealed gunshot residue, bullet fragments, and a wound path consistent with a gunshot wound to the back of the neck that entered the skull. So even without the skull itself, they could tell the trajectory of the bullet and the wound origin based on tissue damage, bullet remnants, and bone fragments left in the neck and spinal area. So basically, they didn't need his head to know where the bullet went in or how he died. Ugh. So still, at this point, after she takes her plea, not a word about the rest of the body. No location, no clue, no closure. Just blank stares from Valerie. At sentencing, Ira's daughter Robin stood up in court and begged Valerie to say something, anything, to let them bring Ira's full body home. She said nothing. Valerie said nothing. Silent. And that silence is probably what contributed to her sentence. Because even though she took a plea, the judge clearly did not like her and was very fed up with her silence. So the judge handed her the maximum sentence for second-degree murder, which was 16 years. If the judge had liked her or felt lenient that day, it could have been 4 years. 4 years. But instead it was 16, which 16 doesn't even seem like enough to me. But it gets even more infuriating. In 2006, just 4 years into her sentence, Valerie starts working on a little international arrangement. Since she's a French citizen, there's a clause that allows her to be transferred back to France to finish her prison sentence. Arizona signed off on it. The feds signed off on it. And she was placed in a federal holding facility and scheduled to be flown to France the next day. And over there, from what I can understand, France isn't exactly known for keeping violent criminals locked up for long, especially not like wealthy, well-spoken, facelifted ones. But just when it looks like Valerie might disappear into a cushy French countryside prison spa for the remainder of her punishment, Ira's daughters find a way to stop it. They do something incredible. They raise hell. They go public. They fight. They protest the transfer and invoke a clause that gives victims' families the right to object to international prisoner swaps. Who knew? And it works. At the very last minute, the transfer is canceled. Valerie is sent back to Arizona to serve out her full sentence. And she did. She served out her full sentence. And on February 15th, 2016, at the age of 64, Valerie was released from prison. She was immediately deported back to France. And today she's a free woman living quietly in the French countryside. No charges, no parole, no accountability, and still no word on where Ira's head, arms, or legs are. The case remains incomplete, and Ira's family still searching for the rest of him. Sadly, my heart really goes out to them. How awful. And that is our story for today. So what do you guys think? Did Michelle help her? Did she plan it for months? Did she act in the heat of the moment? I mean, if it was really self-defense, why did she have to dismember him and not call the police? To me, I don't want to make up anyone's mind for them, but to me, this is exactly what it seems like. She wanted all of his money, and if he divorced her, she would only get half or whatever part of it. She wanted all of it, and she killed him and chopped him up, and that's it. And I think that Michelle probably helped. That's what I think. And as if murder doesn't make you like a bad enough person. The fact that after this, like she's been caught, she's going to prison, give it up. Tell the family where the rest of him is. Like that's almost worse to me. That is so cold and callous. It does you no good to hold on to this information, yet she does. It's cruel. It's really cruel. And odd. Like, where are Ira's arms and legs and head? Obviously, they're gone by now because this was so many years ago, but somewhere buried in the desert, I'd imagine, I guess. I don't know. We may never know. I think at this point, we probably will never know. And that's heartbreaking for his family. So thoughts and prayers go out to them. And that's it. I want to say lucky Valerie, but terrible. Terrible. Thank you for listening and for joining me on this episode of Death by Southwest. If you are loving Death by Southwest, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, come say hi on Instagram, although I probably won't answer your message on Instagram if it's a DM because I'm terrible with DMs. So better that you leave a comment on Spotify. I always see those. I'm pretty active on Patreon. I try to respond to comments that people put on Patreon, and I try to, like post special episodes and stuff a lot. And I'm the kind of person that, it's like one, I can't do I'm not going to do all of it. So right now, Patreon, I seem to be doing well with, decently with. I don't know, maybe my patrons would say otherwise. I am checking the email regularly. I do always see your comments on Spotify because there's not that many. So if somebody leaves a comment on Spotify, it's just really easy. I can't respond to comments on Apple, but I can on Spotify. Yeah. So I guess don't go to Instagram and go to Spotify or check out Patreon or send an email to deathxsouthwest@gmail.com. You can leave a voicemail. I do usually listen to those. What else? Other ways you can help the show? I created a PayPal so that, there's this thing called Ko-fi where it's like buy me a coffee or something. And it's really just people who listen to your show can be like, oh, here, I'm going to throw you $5. And they call it like buying you a coffee, which is cool and smart. But let's just be straightforward about it. If you want to help the show, you can send money through PayPal. There's a link now on everything, I think in the show notes. Like, if I'm going to ask for money, I'm going to ask for it straight up. Just send some money, help out. I'm kidding. You don't have to do that. I just appreciate you listening. I love seeing your comments. I love your suggestions for new cases. And I love your feedback, even when it's like you suck and you're boring and you talk too much about yourself. Like, that keeps me humble. So keep the comments coming. Stay curious, stay safe, stay out of the desert after dark. And I will be back next week with more true crime here on Death by Southwest. Thank you guys so much for listening. Love you all very, very much. Okay, goodbye.
Death by Southwest is hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Executive produced by Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Jenna Schneider.
Audio editing and sound design by Margot Carmichael.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, good night and good luck.